Alrighty, so we are looking at the physiology of weight control today. Objectives, we do want to understand the components of whether losing or gaining weight. Like what are the physiological components? How does that math kind of shake out, you know? Understand how certain like laws of science directly have to do with our weight control. So like, again, like, you know, we're not making any of this stuff up. When we talk about the fact that you know, it's all like a physiologic principle when it comes to like losing or gaining weight, and it is all just energy in versus energy out, right? You're trying to balance those things in the right direction. One of the reasons we know that is true is because of these very strict laws of science that are not necessarily about physiology, but we're going to sort of like look at those for just a moment and kind of understand them. And then we want to be able to, at the end of this lesson, hopefully everybody will feel a lot more confident in communicating the ideas behind like weight loss and weight gain, right? We want you guys to be able to understand this pretty well. And be able to talk about it with your clients. And obviously, like actually talking about it, you kind of have to get into your like, you have to kind of do it a couple times. The more clients you guys end up working with, the better you're going to be at talking about this stuff. And like, you're going to slip into, you know, using like a full paragraph or sentence that you've said a million times. You know what I mean? Like that's why, like, I always say it's always energy in versus energy out, because that's how I've said it for years. I could always flip that around and say energy out versus energy in, but I never do. Because that's sort of what my habits are, you know? And that's something that, like, you know, we can start getting into the habit of now as we are learning how to communicate about like weight loss and stuff. In, you know, introductions here, you know, when we're talking about energy balance, you know, if we are talking about being in some sort of like scenario or condition where there's either a surplus of calories or a deficit of calories, your body's not going to maintain a steady weight because, again, we said this last night, we said this yesterday, you know, your body is not like a car. When a car runs out of gas, it can't run anymore because that's the one fuel it has, and the tank is empty, right? It can't really run on battery life unless it's a hybrid electric car, but then it's got a little bit of like, you know, backup storage. But if you kill that battery, then yeah, you're kind of out of energy there as well. That is sort of your body is more like a hybrid electric car, you know, like it runs on gasoline most of the time, but then when it needs to, it can switch to electricity if it runs out of gas, right? When we run out of gas, our body will tap into our fat reserves, and that's where it's going to make up for those calories, right? Let me see, how many calories worth of fat does the average pound store? And this isn't going to be directly, but it's about, yeah, it's about 3,700, 3,600, 30, we'll say 3,500, you know, are stored in each pound. You know, that's why we say, you know, these numbers here. So that's how many calories are like stored in there worth of energy. And then like, if you had a 180 pound, let's say you had or let's say you had like 140 pound person, right? Which is not, you know, not a very heavy person, right? 140 pounds, they had 10% body fat, which is a really low body fat percentage, times 0.1, that's 14 pounds of fat, times 3,500, they got 49,000 calories worth of fat stored on their body. So like, that's why we're always going to say we essentially have an unlimited amount of like, you know, exhaustible energy stored on our body. If you are stuck on a deserted island, you know, you can go days and days without food because you're only tapping into so much. Now, eventually you're going to run into physiologic problems. The reason starvation is so dangerous isn't always because of a lack of calories. A lot of times it's due to a lack of like nutrients, right? If you had somebody and you're like, all right, we're going to put you on the world's most extreme diet. And you're like, oh, okay, great. It's like, it's going to help you lose a lot of weight. And they're like, yeah, great. And then you just helicopter lift them and drop them off on an island. It's like, we'll see you in a week. Like, that would be really bad. Not only because, you know, of the lack of calories, that person's gonna be real cranky by the time they get back, but also like, you know, they're not getting any nutrients, and we know we need calcium to interact with vitamin D to keep our bones healthy. We know we need B vitamins to facilitate energy production. So if you're not getting any B vitamins and you're just burning calories from your fat stores, you know, it's probably not going to be very efficient, and your body's not going to feel great. Not to mention how important it is to get plenty of water from food. But long story, obviously over-explained because it's me. At the end of the day, when we talk about like energy in versus energy out, if there is more energy going out, your body will find a way to tap into stored energy in order to make up for that deficit and keep moving. And you probably won't even necessarily notice it. Marathoners will sometimes notice it. Long distance runners, they'll sometimes describe it as like hitting the wall. And that's where it's like officially that you are out of like sugar in your blood. You're out of sugar in your glycogen stores. And now you fully switched to like fat. That moment usually happens around mile 20 for like a lot of people, is what most people say. I used to feel that way. But like that that hitting the wall moment, it feels really rough, and it feels like your body it is because it's kind of switching engines, and then it's relying on fat, which your body doesn't want to rely on fat. That's what kind of sucks about this. One of the things that's frustrating about weight loss is the fact that like your body stored all of this excess energy. It doesn't want to tap into it, right? Like if you guys have a savings account, you don't want to tap into your savings. You want to like, limit how much money you're spending. And so what do? You probably slow down. You're just like, well, yeah, I've got $10,000 in savings or whatever, and I could easily tap into that to pay for dinner tonight. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to eat at home instead. And that's gonna, and I'm gonna do that every night this week until my new paycheck comes in. And then, like that's kind of how your body is. Your body doesn't want to tap into your fat stores because it wants to use that if you ever are stuck on a deserted island, right? Like it wants to save it for that. So what it'll do instead is it'll start to do like little things in the background. Your body will naturally and trick you psychologically into not noticing, but it'll do all these little things in the background to kind of slow you down, just kind of turns the dials down a little bit to just slow you down a little, right? And that is where people are like, I stuck to the diet, I exercised every day, still didn't meet my goal, still didn't lose weight. What the heck happened? And it's like, well, mathematically, we created a routine and a plan of action to create a deficit like this, but then your body kind of rebelled against it. Actually, I guess it would be this way. Then your energy out kind of just like slowed down until eventually it got back to balance. And that's probably why we didn't lose weight. So, and then also like the more weight you lose, guess what? You got less stuff to run. So your metabolism is going to be lower, right? So a decrease in your body fat is going to be the result of an imbalance in energy. And same thing with like an increase in body weight, right? That's going to be from the result of like an increase in energy. So when we're talking about energy, we're talking about this whole energy balance concept, right? And energy balance is the relationship between your energy in versus your energy out. And we're going to call that either a positive energy balance or a negative energy balance. Positive energy balance is where you are consuming more than you're expending. That is going to result in weight gain. And a negative energy balance is you are burning more than you are consuming, which is going to result in weight loss. So there's a lot of things you can do to kind of minimize the effects of your body sort of dialing things back, right? One of the reasons why people wear like step trackers and watches and things like that, then they try to get 10,000 steps in a day. It's not like a magic number or anything like that. What it is it's just minimizing the likelihood that they are going to unconsciously have a less physically active day. It's unconsciousness that really sometimes plays against us worse than anything. It is when we sort of don't notice what's going on. This is one of the biggest things we're going to look for. You will hear me say this next module when we get to our exercise psychology course. One of the first things we should look for when we're doing like a psychological assessment of our clients is we need to look for conscientiousness. And what I mean by conscientiousness is we need to look for somebody who is actually paying attention and looking at things specifically and noticing what's happening around them. That's your conscientiousness, right? So for instance, like let's talk about money. Money wise, guys, I'm actually not very like good at being thrifty. I don't think that I'm naturally very good with my money. I put a lot of effort to be better, but like I'm not like natural. I'm naturally better at just like spending as it comes in. You know what I mean? But I started like taking more notice, plugged everything into an app, mint.com, to like lay everything out for me. And now, right before class starts every day, I check it in the morning and I check to see what my balance is, how my accounts are doing. And that, like, noticing, like, being able to see everything and see like, oh, my spending's out of control this month, right? It makes me more conscious of what I'm doing in my life and makes me a little bit better with my money and stuff, right? The same thing is true of weight loss. One of the big things we look for, and one of the things that we'll see, if you do a personality test with 100 people and you found low conscientiousness with, like, let's say 20 of those people, I would be willing to bet you that those 20 people are some of the highest BMIs in the room. And it's because, like, maybe they've stuck to a diet before, but let's say they're walking by somebody's desk and they work in an office, and offices are notorious for having those little candy dishes, and so, like, they're just grabbing like one small piece of candy every time they walk by, and that's adding up to like 150 calories a day, which is not a lot. 150 calories is easy. That's like an apple and a half a cheese stick, um or half an apple and a full cheese stick. That's not a ton. That's not a lot of calories, right? And it's not a lot of food. But if somebody was just doing that and they're just like not thinking about it, like poop, right? Like that is that is what's going to result in weight gain, because they are flipping the equation, right? And then they're like, what the heck? I stuck to the program. I stuck to the diet. And they believe that they did. And so, like, that is a lot of where our energy balances sort of like get out of whack. Or you go to the gym, right? One of the reasons I'm a huge fan of workout journals, I love workout journals. I'm super big on it. I think you should write every pound, every rep down in a workout journal if you are serious about weightlifting. One of the reasons I'm a big fan of that is because it increases your conscientiousness. You become more aware of what you've been doing. Like, I can't tell you how many times before I had, before I started adopting like workout journals, I am sure there were plenty of times where I walked in, I was like, I killed it today. I wrecked that workout, but if I were to go back and like look at my weights, they were all like 5-10 pounds lighter, because maybe I just didn't remember what weight I was supposed to use. If I had written it down, I would have been more aware of it, right? Track your data. Data is very valuable. So it's especially important when we are trying to create this energy balance, right? So we're measuring all of this in terms of calories. Energy balance is going to be measured in, and we're going to use uppercase calories here. That is 1,000 of the lowercase calories, which is the original how they measured it, right? Remember, a calorie is the amount of heat. A calorie with an uppercase C is the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water. So that's 1,000 grams, 1 degree Celsius. So let's say somebody gets like a new job, right? So they get like a new job, and they no longer have to take the stairs at work any day. They still work out maybe 5 days a week. They still like watch what they eat very carefully and stuff, but their job is less physically active. So they start burning 50 less calories per day. Doesn't sound like a lot, right? 50 calories a day, not a big deal, right? But they're going to work 5 days a week. So that's 250 calories per week that they've adjusted, right? And we know there are 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. So this person's still exercising. They're still watching what they eat, but their lifestyle in the background dialed things down just a little bit without them realizing it, right? So in 3 months, that's going to be 1 extra pound of body fat, because like I said, there's 350 calories, 3,500 calories in 1 pound of fat. They are losing an extra 250 calories per week. So in about 14 weeks, that's going to equal to like 1 pound of extra body fat. And that is how it happens, right? We looked at our causes of obesity yesterday. We talked about how it's little things like dishwashers and washing machines and Roombas, all this stuff that makes our life like much more automated. I watched like when I was a kid, I loved the Jetsons, and now that I'm like an exercise person, I'm like, if somebody had like a robotic maid to do everything for them, that person would be 1,000 pounds heavy. Like they'd never be physically active. They got all those like walkways that just like, you know, the moving sidewalks that take them everywhere. I was like, so they don't have to walk anywhere. You know, I was like, oh God, the Jetsons would, everyone would die of heart disease, you know? Also, when is the Jetsons set? Isn't it like coming up? 2062. We are not far. We better, you know, we've we got a lot of automated robots coming our way in the next 20 or 40 years. So anyway, that's a big thing that we're looking at when we're talking about this energy balance. So I kind of want to show you an example of what I'm talking about here. But first I do want to talk about, so how do we know that this is like sort of what's happening here? Well, one of the biggest rules in the scientific community, and you guys have probably heard of this at some point, is if you've ever talked about like physics, right? Is they call it the first law of thermodynamics. Okay, first law of thermodynamics. So, you know, you ever see like a perpetual motion machine? Let's see here. Right. So like, yeah, I know they're not possible. Trying to find like, I guess that one's short enough.
California homeowners, if you were...
Oh Lord, be quiet. All right, so here's a little perpetual motion machine. The idea here, all right, this is whoop, and kind of just like continually, you know, creates like all this motion, right? So gravity causes it to kind of fall down, scoops it up. Now, when you look at this, you might be like, yeah, that will, if nothing interrupts that darn thing, it'll run forever, right? It's got as much energy coming in as it's got energy going out. The problem with that is we know that that's actually not true. Eventually, what's going to happen with that little machine is something's gonna give, because there's a little bit of loss of energy every single time. Just a little, just like what's going to end up happening is the steel ball is eventually going to dent all the wood. And then one day it's going to all be flat, and then it won't roll into the thing and it'll stop someday. Or the metal is just like going to bend slowly, or it's just going to loosen up. And then one day it's going to go like this, and it's not going to make it all the way back to the cup. The reason we know that is because there's small amounts of like energy loss whenever we do something, right? You know, those like steel balls, you pull one and then you drop it and it kicks the one over here, and then it kicks it back over here, and it kicks it back over here, right? Eventually that slows down because there's little bits of energy being lost. You can actually hear it. You can hear the energy being lost in the sound. Whenever you hear the ball like hit, that's energy being released randomly, and it's losing it. Doesn't look like much to the naked eye. But we know this because of this rule right here, the first law of thermodynamics. And it says that energy in any isolated system remains constant and cannot be recreated, although it can change forms. So when that sound hits, you are converting kinetic energy, the energy of like friction and movement and stuff, into like sound energy, right? So, you know, steel ball. I don't know what those darn things are called. Steel balance swinging ball. Newton's cradle. Okay. So you are seeing like kinetic energy, and it's getting lost, right? Like eventually it's going to slow down, right? And it's going to lose its momentum just a little bit every single time until eventually it can't. Now, if you were able to like, if we were somehow able to like isolate this system entirely, and really get it to a place where like it didn't lose energy, it would be able to go forever because the energy going in versus energy coming out is the same. Unfortunately, nothing like that exists in the world. If we ever solve this problem of an actual true perpetual motion machine, which I don't think it's possible for us to ever solve that problem, but if we ever do, we'll never have to run on gasoline. We don't have to worry about solar. Like we will literally have solved the world's energy problems. So the reason I talk about this, I know it sounds like we're off track here, but trust me, it comes back to weight loss. Energy can change form from one version to another, right? It can turn from like motion into sound. In your body, it turns from the energy trapped within like the bonds of a carbohydrate into like a little miniature explosion, it turns into the bonds of a molecule of ATP. And when you break that bond in the ATP, it releases the energy. Now, most of that energy is going to get trapped and grabbed by your cell, and then your cells are going to use it to do work, right? We talked all about that when we talked about ATP production, right? We kick off that last phosphate, energy gets released, your body's going to capture it, and then it's going to use it to do work. For the record, it doesn't seem like it, but you are giving off a little bit of light every time because not all of the energy gets trapped when we break off that ATP molecule. When we break that third phosphate off, some of that energy is converted into light, which we don't really see. But trust me, it is happening. And some of it gets burnt off into like heat, which is why your body temperature is not just whatever the temperature of the outside world is, we are literally giving off a little bit of like heat beyond that because we are burning ATP for energy. So some energy is getting lost every single time. Some of it just kind of, this is why we don't store ATP directly in our body. This is why we store glycogen and glucose and turn it into ATP. If we stored ATP, we would literally go because all the energy would be released all at once and we would spontaneously combust. You'd be like, right? So energy can transform from one version to another. And it's a direct translation, which is great, like the same amount of energy, right? So in the human body, energy is converted into mechanical work. So you moving your muscles around and things like that. Or if you bring in more energy than you are converting and using for work, it's stuck in your body, right? Like let's say you bring in 1,000 calories at Thanksgiving, but you've only moved around for 500 calories worth of energy. That remaining 500 calories is now stuck in a closed system, right? And it can't go anywhere. So it has to do something. Your body it can't just get rid of it, right? It can if you like all of a sudden get really high blood sugar and you're like, let's go, and you go play football, in the backyard on Thanksgiving Day. Yeah, that's burning off some energy. Yeah, that's converting, turkey, mashed potatoes, and stuffing into, steps during a football game. You are converting it, right? But if you don't do that and you get sleepy, which most people do, right? Because the house is warm, you take a nap, right? That extra 500 calories has to go somewhere. So what will happen is it will get stored either in your glycogen, which is the short-term energy storage, or it gets stored in your body fat, which is the long-term energy storage. And we know that, like, again, this is absolutely directly true, and it doesn't feel true sometimes, like the problem with this is somebody's like, no, there's no way it's just math. Look, I followed the diet. I followed the routine. I did everything I was supposed to do. I promise you, right? And it's like, I believe you, but your body found a way to slow you down in response. Now, you'll sometimes hear people describe this as like, oh, you dieted too hard and now your metabolism slowed down, right? That's what you hear people say, right? In fact, how many of you guys have heard somebody say that, right? Not to go on like too hard of a diet or you will ruin your metabolism. Who's heard that?
I've heard that before.
For sure, right? Very, very commonly stated by a lot of trainers out there, right? Who don't really understand this stuff very well. So that's not fully true. Now, it can be true. In really extreme circumstances, it is absolutely true. So like people who have dealt with like anorexia, for instance, their body will legitimately change like their hormonal content. It will do a lot of things and it will actually slow their metabolism down. But like if you look at like a bodybuilder who's going on like a cut before competition to get their body fat percentage really, really low or something, you might think that like their metabolism will slow down in order to like, preserve energy. And by the way, I used to describe it that way every now and then to my clients because it is easy to visualize and that's an easy thing to understand. Like we break it down that way, it's like, yeah, that makes sense, right? And this is where sometimes the things when it comes to like, some of our scientific concepts, the more it makes sense chances are the less true it is, which is always kind of frustrating, but that makes a lot of sense. The reality is their metabolism is going to run at the same rate. Like their cells are, we see a little bit of a dialing back, but it's so minimal that like it wouldn't actually really be noticeable. So there's like maybe a little bit of dialing back that would happen to like the speed at which your cells are converting glycogen and fat into like ATP. That would be your metabolism slowing down. But the reality is we still see people not lose weight and then all of a sudden they're back in an energy balance. So is it their metabolism or is it just them? I would argue that it's not their metabolism that slows down. I would argue that it's their lifestyle. It's them that slows down. What I mean by that is you stop taking the stairs. You start searching for a parking, you circle the parking lot a few times until you get that spot that's just right by the door. You drive to your friend's house down the block rather than walking, even though it's right there. Because you're working out a lot lately, you're tired. Like everything in life feels just a little bit harder because you're exhausted from this morning's workout. And so because you're like, I could do this, but I don't really feel like it. And they'll actually like sit around, you slow down. Your metabolism runs at the same pace. It's your cells. It's programmed into your DNA, And for the record, we talked about DNA. We talked about how like there are biologic differences. Some people's metabolisms do actually run a little bit faster, But that is sort of what we are seeing here. So your body's trying to find a way to maintain homeostasis. It's trying to get you back to neutral. So what it'll do is your body weight is going to be controlled by metabolic, endocrine, all of these different pathways that will slow you down rather than like let you keep burning a lot of energy, right? Imagine if your bank, this is what happens actually all the time. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this about your bank. If you have a savings account or something, you might open that savings account and it might be like, hey, you're earning, 0.5% interest, right? And so like, great, that's awesome. But then the economy takes a hit and all of a sudden your bank sends you an email that probably goes to your junk folder and you probably don't notice, right? Like, and it says, hey, we turned this back. You're going to earn 0.1% now, and then all of a sudden you look at your savings, you're like, well, that's not growing at the same rate that it was, right? But you don't notice a lot of times, right? Because it went into your junk mail. That is obviously only an analogy, but like that's sort of what happens here. So I got a really interesting video to show you guys. This is a Jeremy Ethier video. Oh no. Neat. Oh my God, Greg Doucette hates this guy. I happen to hate Greg Doucette. Is it this one? It is this one. Okay, this one's a little weird, but it's got a really great explanation of what I'm talking about here. Share sound. I don't think Ethier is necessarily like the world's most scientific personal trainer, but I do think that he takes very, you can tell that he has worked with like a lot of clients and stuff. And he has taken this information and used it very well to translate a lot of these sometimes like higher concepts into very easy to have conversations with our clients. And that's what I really like about his videos. I think that he translates stuff that is hard to understand for somebody who, like a lot of times, like I'll try to explain something to my clients. They're like, look, I don't care how the sausage gets made. I want it. Like I don't need the overly detailed explanation. He's got a really great explanation here for how this whole metabolism conversation changes. So here we go.
Here's Tim and here's Tom, two identical twins who weigh the same amount of weight and both want to shed some of their holiday weight gain off. To do this, they both decide to hop on the exact same workout program and the exact same diet plan that requires them to eat at a 500 calorie deficit of 2,000 calories, which theoretically should enable them to both lose a pound a week. After 8 weeks of doing this, Tim is right on target, down 8 pounds and considerably leaner. Tom, on the other hand, hasn't lost any weight and has failed to see any progress despite following the exact same protocols as Tim. So what gives? Well, for all the Toms out there, no, it's not a slow metabolism, and no, it's not a genetic curse. Instead, it's something a lot simpler and easier to fix. You see, although Tim and Tom ate the same amount of calories and performed the exact same workout program week after week, it's what they then did outside of the gym that created this discrepancy. Let me explain. Tim arrives to work and always makes it a point to take the 2 flights of stairs every time he goes up to and down from his office. Tom, on the other hand, is a little tired from the workout and prefers the elevator. During the workday, Tim works at a standing desk and paces around during his calls, whereas Tom prefers sitting at his desk. During break, Tim walks over to the nearest coffee shop to get coffee for Tom, who stays desk-bound. After their long day at work, Tim decides to do some housework and then walks over to pick up his takeout for dinner. Tom, on the other hand, calls it a day and orders in his dinner while binging on Netflix. And this is exactly where the problem lies. All of the subtle additional movements that Tim made after his workout enabled him to stay at his calorie deficit to lose his goal of 1 pound per week, whereas Tom burned significantly less calories throughout the day, which completely offset the calorie deficit he thought he created, hence why he didn't experience any fat loss. And this is the exact problem that most of those claiming to have a slow metabolism really have. It all boils down to something called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT, which is just a fancy term to describe all the additional calories burned from movements that you do during the day that isn't exercise. So walking, cooking, and even fidgeting, for example. And as we saw earlier with Tim and Tom, this can easily equate to drastic differences in the calories that you burn throughout the day and can, as a result, easily boost or hinder your fat loss efforts. In fact, as shown in a paper from the Journal of Clinical Investigation, even when subjects were fed the same diet and locked in the small respiratory chamber pictured here for 24 hours, there was still a difference in additional calories burned through NEAT that day, ranging from 100 to even up to 800 calories between subjects. And the problem for a lot of people is that research has shown that upon starting a diet, calories burned through NEAT tends to significantly decrease and continues to decrease further the longer that you diet for. Eventually, this can reach a point where you're burning such few calories outside of the gym that you're no longer in a deficit despite eating less and training regularly, leaving you stuck at a plateau. Which is why, similar to Tim and Tom's scenario, there's been papers that have shown that even when a pair of identical twins were put on the exact same diet and exercise program for 90 days, one ended up losing over 25 pounds, whereas the other lost just 7 pounds due to their differences in NEAT. So what can you do to prevent this from happening to you? Well, first let's go through what not to do, because the first thing that people do when they run into a plateau is they'll either increase their cardio in the gym a little more or they'll eat a little less. And although this is a viable solution, it only works up to a point and eventually can actually counteract your efforts. This is because recent studies have found that adding in additional cardio only increases your total daily energy expenditure up to a point, after which it plateaus despite you doing more and more cardio, which is simply because some people's bodies will actually compensate by moving a lot less after their workout. And in fact, multiple papers have shown that sometimes people will even compensate with a reduction in activity after their workout to the point where they would actually burn more calories from movement if they didn't work out, meaning that adding in additional cardio failed to help them burn more calories by the end of the day and actually provided the opposite effect. So while additional cardio may be helpful up to a point, it can very quickly start to counteract your fat loss efforts, and you'd instead be much better off focusing on the hours that you spend outside of the gym instead. Now, as for just eating less, again, although this is helpful up to a point, in general, for better adherence and maintenance of muscle mass, your goal should be to keep your calories as high as possible throughout your diet while still hitting your fat loss targets. Otherwise, you'll quickly reach a point where your calories are just too low and not feasible to maintain. Now, with that being said though, there are some other viable options that have been shown to be effective solutions at increasing your NEAT, with the first and most effective solution simply being to make conscious efforts to move more outside of your workout. In fact, research like this paper from the Journal of Obesity has shown that even in mostly sedentary individuals, those who are leaner still tend to stand and move more in general outside of the gym than those who are overweight, which enables them to burn more daily calories and maintain their lower levels of body fat. And although this may sound very difficult and time consuming to do, that really isn't the case at all, even if you don't live a very active lifestyle in general. And to showcase this, let's look at the results of a paper from the Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which compared the caloric burn of 8 different conditions. As you can see in the following graph, compared to sitting down motionless, which burns roughly 80 calories an hour, you can easily burn an additional 40 calories an hour by sitting and fidgeting, which just refers to incorporating subtle movements like toe tapping, stretching your legs and arms, or flipping through papers, for example. And you can increase this even further by an additional 30 calories an hour by instead standing and fidgeting, which again involves similar movements but can involve pacing around the room, for example. And to put this data into perspective, let's go through a calculation of how many additional calories you could potentially burn by applying some of these tips over the course of your day. So you can accumulate 2 hours of standing while fidgeting instead of sitting motionless at work or at home by using a standing desk and making an effort to periodically stretch and pace around the room during calls, for example, which alone will burn an additional 134 calories. Then you can accumulate 2 hours of extra walking instead of sitting throughout the day by taking the stairs instead of the elevator, parking further away in a parking lot, taking a walk during your work breaks, taking your dog out for a walk, and just walking more whenever you can fit it in during the day, as this can help you burn an additional 310 calories per day. And this then amounts to a total of roughly 450 additional calories burned per day. And if we run a quick calculation on that, that amounts to almost an extra pound of fat loss per week, which over the course of the year would amount to almost 50 pounds of fat burned just by focusing on moving a little more outside of the gym. And on that note, I would also highly recommend that you track your steps and actually set a daily step goal for yourself to hit, as this will give you a much better indication of what your overall need levels are and a way to track it throughout your diet. But in addition to what I previously went through, some other things that you should be implementing and prioritizing throughout your diet are 1, diet breaks, and 2, regular resistance training. First off, controlled and monitored diet breaks, something I've talked about in my past videos, which I'll link down below, have been shown to help counteract the decrease in need that you typically experience with your diet, and are something I'd highly recommend that you start implementing to help boost your fat loss in the long run. And secondly, as for resistance training, research has shown that a weight training workout appears to actually increase your NEAT levels for the rest of the day, which is in contrast to the reduction in NEAT that we typically see after cardio sessions, simply meaning that regularly performing weightlifting workouts throughout your diet is essential and should take priority over trying to perform a ton of extra cardio. But all in all, you need to realize that although you may spend 30 minutes to an hour exercising, there's still 15 other waking hours during the day. And it's what you do during those hours that will make the most impact on your fat loss progress. And for a step-by-step program that puts all of the science.
Yeah. So I like that video because it's a really detailed breakdown of like, look, like oftentimes like you'll stick to the routine, you'll stick to the diet and stuff, but you'll just lose a little bit of energy throughout the day and it will eventually balance you out. And you don't even notice it, you know? This is again why like trying to get 10,000 steps in a day, that there's no magic to the 10,000 steps, but it gives you something to focus on. And it's one more variable that like, you know, keeps you from being unaware of like how you're slowing down. If you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh, it's only been 8,000 steps today, right? You know that you were not as active. So like maybe you can head out and get that you know, final 2 grand in or whatever you need to do. So that's kind of what's happening here, right? There's a misunderstanding of how NEAT or non-exercise activity thermogenesis is sort of functioning, right? So if we are going to help our clients create like a calorie deficit or a calorie surplus, depending on whether they want to lose weight or gain weight or whatever, right? Then what we need to do is we need to know how many calories they're burning in their life. So we're going to have the biggest term you're probably going to hear is a BMR, a basal metabolic rate. Now, this has nothing to do with BMI. They do sound very similar, but BMR, basal metabolic rate, is the rate at which your body is expending energy in order to maintain basic physiologic survival, right? Like this is just like you alive, right? Sometimes you'll hear this listed as like RMR or resting metabolic rate. That estimates how much energy you burn, right? And so like they're basically exactly the same concept. Honestly, the RMR is just your BMR, but less strict in terms of like how they measure it. So like a lot of people will just, you know, if I even look it up, if I'm like RMR calculator, you'll see just as many calculators out there as there are BMR calculators, and they all kind of translate to the same thing. And basically we use those formulas that we looked at in our last class, our last course rather, to determine this, right? And so your basal metabolic rate, this is probably going to make up the bulk of how much energy you burn in a day. For most people, it's going to make up 60 to 75% of the total calories that they burn each day. If they have like a very physically active job, like let's say, they're exercising an hour a day and they work as like a construction worker or something. It's a very physically active job and they're exercising. And then they also like go to a pick up basketball game in the evening. That's a super physically active person, right? So now suddenly their resting energy expenditure might take up a smaller pie chart, maybe less than 60%. And their physical activity section will make like a larger section. So you don't really need to know what your clients like, pie chart looks like. But we do know that like these numbers are going to kind of shift around. And again, like if you have somebody who's relatively sedentary, and they don't engage in like a lot of physical activity, then most of the energy that they're burning is probably just coming from basal metabolism, right? Some of it's going to come from the thermic effect of physical activity. Like I said, that's your TEA, thermic effect of activity, or sometimes TEPA, physical activity. But that's any of the energy that you burn outside of your BMR, right? 15 to 30% for most people. The more physically active you are, obviously the higher that pie chart's going to be. I don't think it's super accurate, but looking at like my little activity watch yesterday, since I sprinted around the ultimate field for a couple hours, I was at like, I think 3,700 calories burned yesterday. And so like my physical activity made up, normally I'm a little bit closer to about 3,000, so that's a 700 calorie difference. So my pie chart shifted a little bit yesterday. Does that necessarily matter? Not really. This is all just kind of helping us highlight to our clients sort of like where the energy is kind of coming from. This is one of the reasons why, if we know your resting energy expenditure makes up like such a significant portion of your energy, this is one of the reasons why trainers in particular love to put muscle onto our clients. The more muscle you have, the more likely you are to burn passive energy, right? If this is making up 70% of the energy you burn in it each day, this is why we know. And we can see that actually, if we look like, let's say we've got like a 25-year-old person who's 5'10", 160 pounds. Now, using this formula, that comes out to 1,700 calories a day. Using this one, it's 1,770 calories. So that's a difference of 50. But there's a formula called the Ketch-McArdle formula, which takes a look at your lean body mass to calculate out your BMR. It's just a slightly different formula. Let's say this person has 30% body fat. We hit calculate here. Their basal metabolism is actually closer to 1,400 calories per day. Let's look at the same person with 10% body fat. Their basal metabolism is back up to 1,780. So you can see what a huge difference your body composition makes. And that's why personally, I like the Ketch-McArdle formula, or the Cunningham formula, which takes into account your lean body mass to calculate out your basal metabolism. Because you could have 270-pound clients, but one of them has more muscle mass. They're going to burn more energy passively throughout the day. Again, one of the reasons why we love doing like, particularly like hypertrophy training with like our clients in their legs, it's going to help them burn lots and lots of energy. And then there's the thermic effect of food. We do know that like certain foods, they take a lot more energy to absorb and digest than others. So like if you're on like a really high fat diet, fat is really easy for your body to process. So it doesn't really burn that many calories. Carbohydrates are kind of in the middle, and protein is pretty difficult. So like if you're eating a lot of like meats and animal products and proteins and things like that in your diet, protein is difficult for your body to break down. So it takes the most energy to process. Spends the most money to make the most money, I guess, or to make money, right? And so this is only going to be about 10% of your calorie burning, but would be a little bit higher if you're on like a very, very high protein diet. So like if you're on a high protein, high fiber diet, fiber is also like your body tries really hard to break it down, even though it kind of can't. But it puts all the effort in, like, come on, tries to break it up and never succeeds. So high fiber, high protein diets, both of those have been shown to have like a higher thermic effect. It's a little bit harder to process that, which is why like bodybuilders, go on these like very, very, very high protein diets on their way to competition. People have looked at that and they're like, oh, they're eating a lot of protein because it helps them maintain muscle or build muscle. That's not why. It just burns extra calories. They're just trying to find one more sneaky way to burn some extra calories. So like I said, there's a lot of different formulas. You can see here, Harris Benedict, Mifflin St. Jeor, the Owens formula. All of these are really good, but they're going to tell you your basal metabolism, right? They're going to tell you your basal metabolic rate. And then what we're going to do, once we know how many calories they burn at rest, we're going to multiply it by an activity factor to determine how many calories they should actually burn. So you can see here are the activity factors that we generally use. You can see if somebody's sedentary, we kind of just keep it the same. If they're very like low active, like, so let's say they're getting 30 minutes a day, moderate activity, we might take that basal number and multiply it by 1.1 or 1.2. If they're a little bit more active, where they're doing about an hour of exercise every single day, maybe a little bit more, 125 or 127. So these activity factors, these numbers, these multipliers are going to, give us a more accurate number. That's why when you look at any BMR calculator, you can see here, I said it was 17 a day when they were, basal, but if they're sedentary, like they're not, they're living a life, right? It's probably closer to 2060, right? But if they're exercising maybe 1 to 3 days a week, we say 2361. And so that goes up higher and higher and higher, depending on how physically active they are. The more active, the more calories you get to consume. So does that make sense to everybody? Everybody tracking this so far? We talked about the law of dynamics and energy balance and things like that. Do we have any questions?
No, honestly, I've noticed, I learned a few right now with the whole energy after the gym, like still staying active, playing a big role. Like it doesn't even matter if you're working out the same.
Mm-hmm. And there are some other factors at play there, like, like I've said, your metabolism runs a little hotter. If you are trying to lose weight, right? And you do like high intensity exercise in particular, we know that high intensity exercise helps you burn extra calories after the workout is over. Remember we call that EPOC, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. And that's where your body is basically trying to it's a working overdrive to refill your glycogen and do all these other things. So you're burning all these extra calories from an intense workout. And that's great. But if it slows you down and you're not active after the gym and you spend the rest of the day on being on the couch, well, then that extra EPOC doesn't account for anything. It just kind of balances out in the end. So again, conscientiousness, guys, a simple awareness is huge. We get to watch my favorite video on the internet next mod, and it's all about awareness. So if we're estimating out our energy needs, let's do a little bit of math here, right? Because now what we need to figure out is we need to get our target calories. Target calories are basically the calorie homework for your client, right? So once we know what once we have a good estimation of what their caloric expenditure is, then we as the fitness professional can help our client develop a caloric goal. And since we know there's about 3,500 calories in a pound of fat, we can actually do some pretty simple math to figure out how to get our client where we want to. So let's say Samantha's burning about an average of 2,300 calories a day based on her current lifestyle. So we calculated it out for her. I got to try to make a person that's around 2,300 calories here. Let's say she's, 30 years old, female, we'll say 5'10". And let's say she weighs 190 pounds, right? So she's leading, actually it wasn't bad. She exercises, let's say she exercises 1 to 3 days per week. So she goes to a yoga class or something. She lifts weights once a week, right? So she's engaging in physical activity. She's burning about 2,300 calories a day based on how she's currently living her life. But she wants to lose a little bit of weight. She wants to get her body weight down over the next year or so. And so she set herself like a, medium length goal of 10 pounds over the next 3 months, right? So that's her short-term goal to hopefully get her to her long-term goal, down the road. So she's like, I want to lose 10 pounds over the next 3 months, right? Cool. So if we were to say something like, all right, well, let's try to increase your caloric expenditure by about an extra 250 calories per day, right? So she was at 2285 here. Let me see if this is about 250 minus 2435. Look at that. It's literally 150. That is, I made the perfect person. I got to remember this for the evening. 30, 5, 10, 190. All right. So if we get her, it's like, all right, well, you're going to the gym about 3 days per week. If we can bump that to 5 days per week, right? If we bump that there, we're already burning an extra 250 calories each day, right? And so 250 calories a day times 7 days a week, that's an extra 1,750 calories that she will be burning every single week. So simply by being physically more active, she's burning an extra 1,750 a week. We divide that by 3,500. That means she's losing about a half a pound a week here. And she's got 3 months to lose this extra 10 pounds. So if that's, 3 months, that's probably for a 13 weeks or so. So that's going to get her about 6.5 pounds. So she's not quite to her goal yet, right? But it would get her close. So then let's say, all right, and currently her weight has maintained the same. She's like, I've had the same body weight for the last like 6 months. So clearly, diet wise, we know that she's in a calorie, balance, right? So now it's like, all right, well, why don't we, instead of putting you on a 2,300 calorie diet, which clearly you're on, what if we just drop that down by 200 calories a day? So we eliminate 200 calories, right? And we could do that very easily. Like maybe every morning Samantha's having like a bowl of cereal. Oh, hold on.
I literally just sneezed at the same time.
Wait, what's that?
I literally just sneezed at the same time as you.
Oh, yeah.
This wind is not it.
I pulled up a very dusty webpage. So let's say she's currently using like whole milk, right? For her bowl of cereal every morning, right? So we make like a small adjustment. It's like, okay, well, instead of whole milk, why don't we adjust that to like skim milk, right? Fat-free, right? So non-fat milk. So now that's going to go down to 83 calories, right? So that's going from 148 to 83. So we cut the calories in half there. She lost about 75. Maybe she was going with like, 2 slices of toast in the morning. We cut it down to 1 slice. That's going to eliminate about 110 calories there, right? And then, we swap out, maybe she's having like, I don't know, 2 small potatoes as like her starch at dinner. We swap that out for maybe like, 1/4 cup of brown rice instead, right? And so like very similar, but just slightly less calories, right? So we make a couple little dietary adjustments. She's now decreased her caloric intake by 200. So she went from 2,300 calorie diet down to a 2,100 calorie diet. That's 200 calories a day times 7 days a week. That's 1,400 calories per week that she is now like losing in her diet. So combine that 1,400 a week from her diet to the 1,750 per week by being just a little bit more physically active, right? The deficit that we're creating now is 3,150 calories. So 3,150 calories a week will result in a little over 12 weeks, about 10.8 pounds of fat loss, right? So 3,150 times 12 weeks, 37,800 divided by 3,500 calories, 10.8 pounds lost in just about 12 weeks, right? 3,500 pound of fat, 3,150 a week times 12, 3,780 divided by 3,500. There's our 10.8. Does that make sense? I know the math stuff is the worst. How are we doing on that, guys? Decent enough. Yep. Okay. um,
We use that formula to find how much weight they're losing a week, or
yeah. So basically, we know that it's about 3,500 in a pound of fat. So we're just trying to figure out like how to get to whatever fraction of 3,500, right? So like the easiest way to do this, what most people recommend, and even this BMR calculator, if I go like calorie calculator, which is totally the same calculator as the BMR one, they just throw the diet stuff in there. She was 30, 5'10", and 190. And we got her to start exercising 4 to 5 times a week instead of 1 to 3. If I hit calculate here, it's going to say for weight loss to eat about 2,178 calories a day, which is around where we ended up because she was at 2,300. We dropped down to 2,100. So if you create a deficit of 500 calories per day, right? We know that there are 3,500 calories in a pound of fat, and we know there's 7 days in a week. So 500 calories a day times 7 days a week, that's 1 pound, 3,500 calories per week. Does that make sense, David?
a little bit.
Yeah. So that's what we do. So what we did is we increased her activity and we decreased her calories to create 500, and we did it 7 days a week. We went a little over 500 actually, because it was 200 here and well, actually, I guess we went a little under 500. So we were just a little under 500, which is why it didn't take 10 weeks. It took 13 weeks for us to get there. If you cut by 500 calories a day, that is 1 pound of fat per week that you'll tap into. So let's say you have a client. Oh yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
So let's say you have a client who is 180 pounds and they want to get down. They're 180 pounds. They want to get down to 170, right? So they want to lose 10 pounds, right? Well, here's another way that we can sort of reverse this math a little bit to give us a goal. So they want to lose 10 pounds, which means they need to burn 3,500 calories 10 times. So 10 times 3,500, that is a total calorie reduction of 35,000, which obviously they're not going to be able to do in a day, right? So let's say they want to lose 10 pounds over, let's say 9 weeks. It'd be kind of a weird number, right? So 35,000 divided by 9 weeks, they need to lose 3,888 calories every single week. We know there's 7 days in a week. So we divide that by 7. And now we tell our client, well, if you can create a calorie reduction of 555 every day, that will get you there in 9 weeks. Does that make sense, guys? That's another way that we can do this, right?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Yeah, and we can also retool it another way, right? Let's say, they've got a wedding in 9 weeks, right? This would be a really good example of like, I got 9 weeks to lose this much weight. Okay, great. There's our math, right? We could also do it this way. You could be like, I want to lose 10 pounds, right? I don't really care how long it takes me, and I really hate dieting. And it's like, okay, well then why don't we just keep you on the same diet you're on, and we increase your physical activity? So it only creates a deficit of, by increasing their physical activity, you're not burning 1,000 calories in the gym every time you go, like it's like, okay, well, let's say you're burning 300 calories in the gym every time, and you're going to the gym 5 days a week, right? So that's 300 calories a day times 5. The other 2 days, Saturdays and Sundays, they're not going to the gym. They take the weekends off, right? So that's about 1,500 calories a week. This person wants to lose 10 pounds, right? So 1,500 times 10 times 3,500. Oh, shoot, I did that wrong, actually. Sorry, 300 calories times 5 days a week. That's 1,500 calories, right? Divided by 3,500. I multiplied instead of divided, right? So that means they're going to lose 0.42 pounds per week, right? And they wanted to lose 10 pounds. So it's going to take them 4.28 weeks to get there. So we'll say to our client, about 5 weeks. Give us a little bit of leeway because everybody's going to goof it up a little bit. Right? So that's another way that we can kind of retool this math. You can go in any direction you need to do. Just remember 3,500 calories is equal to a pound of fat. And it's not perfect, guys. It's, you know, it fluctuates a little bit. But that's about how many calories are in 1 pound of fat. So you can give your client a goal to tell them how long it's going to take, or you could reverse it from like what their goal is and figure out what their deficit is. Now, sometimes it'll be totally unreasonable. You'll get a client who's like, you know, I want to lose 10 pounds in, you know, 4 weeks, right? They're like, I want to lose 10 pounds. You know, let's say it's February 3rd right now, right? Let's say your client's like, you know, I got to lose 10 pounds by March 1st, right? So we can figure that out. We got, you know, let's say they have to start tomorrow because, you know, the day is gone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 23, 24, 25. They got 25 days, right, to lose 35,000 calories, right? So that's 35 divided by 25 days. They need to be creating a deficit of 1,400 calories a day to get there, which means that like they need to burn at least, they need to be like negative 1,400, right? So if my client is this person right here, you know, who is, you know, 5'10", 190 pounds, 30 years old, right? If I hit calculate here, you know, their basal, hold on, I need to go back to the BMR calculator. They're only burning 1,800 calories a day. If they're sedentary, burning maybe 2,200 calories every day, that means that they only get to eat a diet of 800 calories. That's not going to work, right? It's possible mathematically, but it's probably impossible human wise. You know, like nobody's got a willpower to stick on a dumb diet like that for 30 days, you know, no matter how much they say they do. So we need that 1,400 a day. What if they, well, it's like, okay, well, that's not exercising. What if they exercise every day? Okay, great. Let's say they're exercising daily, right? And so they're burning like 2,800 calories every single day. They still only get to eat a diet of 1,400 calories every day. So they get to eat 1,400 calories and they have to exercise every day. And it's like, all right, well, what if they do HIIT classes every day? What if they're going to like Orange Theory, like spin classes, getting their heart rate super, 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 super high? All right, that's 3,473 minus 1,400. All right, if they eat 2,000 calories a day, they can do that. But they have to have a physically active job and they have to do crazy intense exercise and they only get to eat 2,000 calories a day. I think that 2,000 calories a day is a diet you can actually stick to. I do, you know, but I do think that it's relatively low for most people. And I think that if they're sticking to this medium low thing while doing super high intense activity, I don't think they can do it, you know. I just don't think somebody's gonna be able to stick to it. So I think that 10 pounds lost is mathematically possible by March 1st, but I don't think it's like human willpower possible. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So my question was going to be like, would I just kind of do the opposite if I wanted to gain that type of weight in that period of time?
Yes. Monday, I'm gonna have a really good lesson on how to like adjust it for weight gain. You do want to make sure that you're not being too aggressive. Because if you're really aggressive about your calorie intake, like the math, right? You're like, all right, well, I want to gain a pound of muscle a week, right? And so you're like, I want to have 500 extra calories every day. The problem is it's not going to be a pure pound of muscle every week because we don't gain muscle as easily as we gain fat. Muscle requires us to like tear down the muscle and then your body to go, oh God, I got to fix that, right? Whereas fat is like, oh, we got extra calories, shunk, you know, it's easy. So you got to make sure that you're not being too aggressive about your caloric intake. Otherwise, you're just going to gain a bunch of fat instead of gaining a bunch of muscle. But I will help you break that math down on Monday. I believe. Let me make sure I'm not lying.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And we'll talk about like what a good rate of weight gain is. What chapter? Okay. Oh Lord, I must have had to start. Oh no, it's fitness assessments on Monday. I lied. Hold on. Tuesday. Okay, internet. Can we move this along? Canvas. Oh, it didn't give me the chapter name. Nutrition strategy. Yeah. Okay. So it's going to be on Tuesday. Tuesday, we'll be going over that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So there we go. Now we've got, and by the way, when we talk about that super low calorie thing, not only do I think it's hard to stick to, I also think it's very hard to get your nutrition in, when you're only eating 1,500 calories a day, you only have 1,500 calories worth of energy to ensure that you are getting the right amount of vitamin C, the right amount of B vitamins, right? That's also difficult. One more reason why crash diets don't work. So now sometimes you'll hear people say, well, what about my metabolism slowing down, right? Like this is where people have a theory that like your body has these internal processes and mechanisms that will resist deviations in your body weight, right? So like as your body weight starts to drop, your body goes, oh no, we're losing body weight, and that slows its metabolism down, right? So that's the set point theory is what they call that. There is not a ton of observable evidence that the set point theory is true. Like it's one of these things that we all feel is true, right? And like they've seen it a little bit and measured it a little bit, but like to say that this is the biggest reason why people don't lose weight is because like their metabolism slows down doesn't, like for instance, they did they've looked at people who were on The Biggest Loser, right? One of the reasons why I hate that show, loved my job, but my job was not associated with the show. I absolutely hated the actual Biggest Loser show. But let's just say like looking at, they've revisited those people years later and a lot of them gained the weight back. And a big part of the reason is because like the show didn't really focus on like learning sustainable long-term strategies. They focused on like short-term results, which makes it look really good on TV, so a lot of people think like the set point theory describes like how the metabolism slows down. I argue that the set point theory describes how the body slows down. So sometimes you'll see an energy gap. As people start to lose weight, like let's take a look at that person, from earlier, right? BMR calculator here, right? Remember how we used the body fat percentage formula, right? So this person was, let's say they were 30% body fat, right? So only burning like 1,400 calories per day, right? So they start to lose weight, right? Let's say, yeah, I need to pick like a heavier person. Let's say they're 200 pounds, right? With 30% body fat. So they're burning about 1,700 calories per day, right? So then they lose 10 pounds, right? So now they're down to 190. And their body fat percentage drops to, let's say, 28%, right? Great, cool. We're going in the right direction. Boop. 1,740 down to 1,710. So that's a loss of 30. Probably not going to be very noticeable. That's only 200 calories per week. It's not a huge difference, right? Another week goes by, they lose another couple weeks go by, they're down to 180, right? Their body fat percentage drops down to 26%, right? We hit calculate, and they lost another 35 calories there, right? So now that's a difference of like, what was it, 30 the first time and 35 the second time. So there's 65 calories less per day. Now the diet that they were on is not working quite as well as it used to, right? So things are slowing down a little bit. And so we're starting to see everything go down. They go down to 170. Let's say their body fat percentage is down to 24, right? 1,600 calories per day. They're down to 160. They're at 22%. We hit calculate, 1,593, right? Like And it's like, oh man, like now we really should focus on like muscle building so we can keep that as calories, because now their deficit's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, right? That's part of the energy gap, right? As people lose weight through energy restriction, it requires less for their body to run. It's close to about 8 calories per pound of fat loss, right? So like, it's not a slower metabolism. There's just less stuff to metabolize, right? There's less you to keep alive. So it requires less calories. We estimate it to be about 8 calories per pound on average. Now, one of the other things that we talk about is what's called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, aka NEAT. That's what we watched the video on earlier. It describes how many calories are burned through activity. So somebody who's bouncing their legs, somebody who's fidgeting, people who work at a standing desk, you're walking to get coffee instead of like, driving or whatever, right? When people are on diets, they often decrease their NEAT. So in that video, if you guys rewatch that video, it has a link to the article or the research study that they did, where they were like, observing all this stuff. They put people on a calorie restricted diet. They put people on an exercise routine, and they had them stay in this really fancy little hotel room that was like pumping the same amount of oxygen and temperature in for literally every person. They maintained as many variables as possible. By the way, that research article is really long. I recommend you read it, but it's lengthy. And because they go to really detailed lengths to describe like how they were like, look, we eliminated all the variables. The room was the same temperature. The same amount of air was coming in and going out. And they measured, and they just videotaped everybody. And they were in these like little tiny rooms for, a lot of days. And what they noticed is that like some people, their metabolism or their lifestyle or just like their psychology, the psychology, they were like bouncing still. They were still very physically active. They were pacing in the room because they got bored or something. And the other people, like they were a little bit more sedentary. They watched a lot of TV. They just kind of hung out. And they saw, even though both groups burned the same amount of energy during the workouts, both groups were on the same diet, one half of the group lost more weight than the other one. The people that they observed stayed physically active through the rest of the day. And the other people made up for the calories they burned in the gym by moving less throughout the rest of the day. So NEAT is all the activity that you burn throughout the rest of the day. And that sometimes gets turned down when you are not very physically active. So you put somebody on an 800 calorie diet, they're going to take a nap. Then they're like, I don't normally nap. I don't know why I keep doing this lately, We've also got hyperplastic obesity, and that is where there's actually the production of more fat cells. This is what we talk about when we talk about like the dangers of like people who are on like yo-yo diets. Your body will actually make new fat cells more likely. That makes it much easier to have more cells to fill up with fat. So we call that hyperplastic obesity. This is what I talked about yesterday. Occasionally we'll get the client who, honestly, maybe liposuction is better. I would never advocate for surgery, and I would certainly never advocate for an easy way out. But like medically, that is sometimes the safest choice, depending on the client. If they have like continually gone up and down and up and down and up and down their entire life, honestly, it could be safer medically for that person to literally get rid of some of those fat cells. And that sucks for me. I don't like admitting that because I'm all about, come on, human spirit, let's work, but that's the reality of the situation. And then there is the metabolic efficiency part of things. So yes, there's the set point theory side of things. It's like, what if your metabolism literally just slowed down? And this is where you'll read this in your textbook. There's a lot of disagreement. A lot of people have seen very minor reductions in cellular metabolic rates. Not a lot of evidence to suggest that's what it is. People are like, oh, that diet ruined my metabolism. There's just not a lot of evidence to say that that is true. Maybe. In a world of infinite possibilities, in a universe of infinite possibilities, which is where we live, in a multiverse of anything that could happen, maybe it did. But based on what I've read in my entire career, based on what I've studied, the likelihood of that being the case is slim. No pun intended. So now, what about being like what's causing people to be overweight? This is kind of a recap of what we talked about yesterday. But yeah, sometimes it can be like the genetics. Your genetics will determine your weight status. Like part of the reason why I have a hard time like gaining weight sometimes. I look at like, my fellow trainers who are just like, they love like the strength training aspect and things like that. I look at like myself as a trainer, and I do love strength training. I do. But I don't have a very big appetite. I don't eat like a ton of calories. Like I'm like the appetite of a baby bird, like you look at like, it's like, oh, that guy must eat. Honestly, I kind of don't, some people have a huge appetite. They're like, they train and like, oh, I'm gonna eat now. It's great. Good on you, I think genetically, that's just where I come from. Look at my dad. He's kind of he's kind of a wiry guy as well. And like, I love cardio. Some people hate cardio, so I'm sure there's some like, cave person instincts back there. And I come from a tribe of like, oh, you want to fight? Bye. And then run away. Like, I'm sure that's the tribe I come from somewhere down the line. There's definitely some genetics at play here, guys, for sure. So, certain individuals are going to have a predisposition. This is where the conversation of like, the whole idea behind like a mesomorph versus an endomorph versus an ectomorph, right? If you've ever heard that conversation, you will see people who are sort of, good Lord, that's a small picture. There we go. You'll see people who are, ectomorphs, right? Those are people who tend to be a little bit skinnier, right? You got mesomorphs. Those are people who tend to be a little bit more muscular. And then you've got endomorphs, people who have a predisposition for excessive body fat, right? You'll hear people say that. And sometimes people use that to like, as like a way of like, oh, well, I'm never going to reach my goals because I'm predisposed this way. But again, we know that it all comes down to like the physiology of weight control. I do believe that like some people are going to be dealt an easier hand than others, but it's a lot of the variables are within our control. So one of the ways that we can help our clients who are trying to like lose weight or gain weight, manage their diet is by controlling their hunger. So like hunger is going to be controlled by your satiety, right? Sensations that help you feel either full or hungry, right? If you are very satiated, you have a high level of satiety, you're feeling full. That is your body creating this hormone called leptin. Leptin signals that you have sufficient energy stores and you don't need to eat anymore. This is why people on diets have told you like, hey, eat slowly. Because if you eat slowly, you will your body has time to realize it's been given food. That's not a muscular thing. That is a hormonal thing. Your body has time to produce leptin saying, hey, yeah, we got the calories we need. We can stop now, right? So this is one of the reasons why like frequent snacks are very, very helpful, right? Eating small meals throughout the day results in making more leptin. Also, guys, eat off of a plate. This is a really weird thing. This doesn't make any sense. But your brain knows when to create leptin by watching food disappear. Sounds weird, but like if you're eating a bag of potato chips and you're just unconsciously reaching into that bag, you are more likely to eat more potato chips than if you took them out, put them on a plate, and then eat them there. Because your brain actually watches the food disappear and says, oh, I guess we're getting calories. We should be full. That's a big deal. And then trying to make fuller looking meals that can disappear also has a positive effect. So like filling your plate up, spreading your food out actually is a very good weight loss tool. Which if you're having trouble with like a small appetite, all of the opposites of those things can help. Ghrelin is going to stimulate your appetite. This is what happens when your body doesn't get enough fuel, right? And so that definitely triggers that. So there are certain hormonal differences that play a role in your metabolism, right? Decreasing your energy rate by like, focusing more. If you create cortisol, for instance, so cortisol is a stress hormone. Okay, so stress hormones cause your body to go, we're stressed, right? So it is much more likely to store body fat, because that will keep you alive longer if you're in a stressful situation, and burn muscle mass. This is one of the reasons why it's so important to get enough sleep. I'm going to show you guys a very interesting video on Tuesday that is going to show what happens when you weight train, which is stress, without getting enough sleep. The amount of muscle gained is practically nothing. It's very difficult to gain muscle without adequate levels of sleep. And I'm talking to everybody in here because I know it's hard to get sleep sometimes, you know, especially if you have like insomnia problems. But that's a big hormonal thing. It's because of like cortisol production. And then your environment does obviously play a huge role here, right? You know, we live in a place that has like an abundance of food and a lack of physical activity. So teaching our clients, and this sentence right here, I think is in your homework, guys. I think this is a homework question. Teaching your clients to overcome the conveniences of modern technology is one of the best ways to help them create, you know, or shift their caloric expenditure. You know, the guy is like super, I mean, he's definitely not a role model because the guy ended up being a freaking weirdo. But like you look at Jared from Subway, his story is still very effective. The guy walked to Subway every day. It wasn't because Subway is healthy. He just started walking to get his lunches instead of like staying where he was and staying put. That is a very effective way to create a caloric expenditure. So your environment's going to play a big role. You know, try to help your client eliminate sugary beverages from their lifestyle. You know, I had a client who just kept falling off the wagon. He loved fast food. God, he loved fast food. He would go to this one Carl's Jr. by his house all the time. And so like the solution ended up being, and he would always do it when he was stressed out coming home from work. And I was like, the solution ended up being him taking a different route home for work. So he had to drive an extra mile to go around and avoid fast food. But that small change in their lifestyle made a huge difference in his life. And all of a sudden the pounds started coming off. And I was like, how was your diet this week? You know, we check in consistently. I was like, how did you do on your eating? Did you eat any fast food, any of this? Did you fall off the wagon? He's like, no, I made all my meals at home. And it was literally just, he just needed to not drive by it. Because it was always an unconscious decision for him. So yeah, those are all sort of our a lot of causes of obesity there and things that we can shift to have positive benefits, you know. So it is definitely driven by environmental changes, also biologic metabolism changes. So we want to help our clients learn how to control their energy intake and their energy output by making small lifestyle changes. So yeah, that's about it today, guys. How y'all feeling?
Feeling good.
Pretty good. Just a lot of
Definitely gonna come in the morning.
Oh, love that.
More focused, and I paid more attention this time. I actually enjoyed it a lot.
Hey, I dig that. She actually enjoyed it this time.
Stop. I mean, you know, like with full focus.
Nah,
Like I feel like I was able to kind of like concentrate a lot more, especially to the math.
Yeah, right. But I will say, yeah, I get it. Any questions, Dion, David?
not too many. Honestly, like I feel like it's just like how Joseph always says. I think we just need to do it, you know.
True story. It does take a little bit. Honestly, guys, a lot of this stuff locks in the first time you have a client and you're like, all right, eat this many calories. And then you're working with them for 4 weeks and they're like, they've made no progress. And you're like, what the hell? You know, like I wrote you the greatest program. I trained you the greatest way and I gave you the greatest diet. This should have worked. What happened? You're all going to experience this. And you know, what happened is they didn't stick to the plan. They didn't know they didn't stick to the plan. And they tried to stick to the plan, but something went wrong in the background. And you have to Sherlock Holmes. Based on this candy wrapper, did you know that you ate this candy? It's like, oh, I forgot about that, right? It's like, aha, you know, elementary, my dear Watson.
It's like it's just one of those things where you have to like hold them accountable to it. Obviously you're not like their boss or nothing like that, but you got to hold them accountable to what they're doing, right?
Exactly. All right, well, lady and gents. Oh, Dion, yeah, do you have a question?
Oh no, I didn't have a question. I like the term that you use though, the energy in and the energy out. You know, needs to balance out. That's really.
It's also, I'll tell you from experience, it's also a much more positive way. A lot of people have like
Yeah.
I don't want to call it trauma, but like they have a really bad relationship with the word calories.
Yeah.
Or like, calories in versus calories out. And that often like sets people off. Energy in versus energy out is also much more positively received.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I will let you guys out of here and I'll see you all tomorrow.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.